Hello, everyone. This is a video on how to write a DBQ. Now, I made this for world history. The process is the same for APWH history, but if you're anything like me, if I'm an APUSH, I want an American prompt. I get that, but this is what I have. All right, so I'm going to use the one on the Mexican Revolution, and ideally, you can Google it. Maybe you can find it online, but let's go over the points. It's a little bit overwhelming. Hopefully, you've already gone over this with your teacher. So you get 1 point for contextualization, and I'll explain what that is in a second. You get another point for your thesis. Then you can get a point if you address 3 documents, or you can get 2 points and it uses 6 documents. And you have to support your argument in your thesis. You got to support them with the document. And you can't quoting is not really a good thing on the DBQ. Look, it says, in addition, the response must use the content of the documents to support an argument. So whatever your argument is in your thesis, you got to support them with, you have to spell it clearly, like this is why this supports the document. Okay. You also get another point for evidence beyond the documents. Okay. So you got to think of something that is not in the documents. Okay. And, hopefully you'll get lucky and you could do that. But you need to support your argument with something that was not in the documents that were given to you. Now, we're not done yet. Analysis and reasoning. You need to HIP 3 documents. Every teacher has a different way of teaching it, but you need to talk about the historical, the audience, the historical significance, the view, the purpose. I like to think of the bias. What is the bias? What is the purpose? Okay, do that for 3 documents. Do it for 4 if you can. Okay, but again, you're on a time constraint. Okay, and then finally, the complexity point. All the videos that I have seen on YouTube say don't even bother with the complexity point. Nobody ever gets it. But from what I understand is if you analyze multiple causes of something, I think that's when you group the documents maybe, explain the similarity and difference or continuity and change, explain both causes and effect. In my mind, this is when if you have time, you just dump anything fancy that you can and just hope. Give multiple perspectives, or give alternative views or evidence. Okay? Most students don't get the complexity point, but and who knows, maybe I won't get it either based on what I'm about to write, because I am about to write the thing for you. You're not going to see me write it, but I already have it written, but that's okay. Okay? All right, so here is the prompt. Feel free to make sure that you are on a computer right now, not a cell phone. If you're on a cell phone, stop the video and get on a computer, because the font that I'm about to give you is going to be too small. Plus, and also make sure you know how to screenshot. So maybe you can go back to the documents and look at it. Okay. Ideally, you would have the paper documents next to you, but you can Google Mexican Revolution DBQ. You might be able to find it. I don't know. Okay. All right. So here we go. All right. So start with contextualization. 2 or 3 sentences. You have to know how to do this for the LEQ and the DBQ. Contextualization is basically the Star Wars scroll. It's basically saying what is going on. It's kind of like when you're watching a TV show and then they say, previous episode, and then they give you certain snippets, not just from the last episode, but from the whole season, just to remind you of what is going on, so you have context. Okay, takes about maybe 2 or 3 sentences. Okay, and another thing, if the topic is economic, then your contextualization needs to be about economics. So here we go. Let's look at it again. We're going to keep looking at this. Evaluate the extent to which economic factors led to the outbreak of the Mexican Revolution. So economic factors, and they give you the time period. Evaluate the extent. So to a major extent, to a limited extent, that would be what your thesis is going to look like. You will say that economic factors played a major role in causing the Mexican Revolution. Or you could say economic factors played a minor role. You see that? So you need to choose. And I'm not saying that's easy, but you are going to have to choose the extent. Okay? All right. We'll come back to the prompt. All right. So I would go ahead and just start with your contextualization. And you need to talk about, like, what are the things that are leading up to this 1910 to 1920 revolution? So you need to brainstorm. As far as economics, what is going on in this time period? Okay, so think like 1870s, 80s, 90s, 1900, 1910. What is going on? And you need to think about that. And it might take you a few minutes to think about it. Hit pause if you really want to do this right and think about economics. What is going on economically during this time in the world? Okay, hit pause, but I need to move on. So, all right, so here's a couple of things. Here's a couple of things I want you to consider. So when you're talking about the late 1800s, we've got imperialism. This is when Africa had been totally dominated by European colonists. You've got Karl Marx and the Communist Manifesto. You've even got the beginnings of the Russian Revolution in 1917. Okay, so you've got, in America, you've got an economy that's going from laissez-faire to a more liberal economy, one where the government plays a greater role. Okay, so you've got the rise of communism and socialism in Europe. Okay, so here are some things. This is just me brainstorming. By the way, I knew that imperialism was going on, but I never knew what the word neo-imperialism was. I cheated. I looked it up because I wanted to do good for you. Neo-imperialism describes America's relationship with Mexico, because while America didn't take over Mexico, our private companies went down there, and like Carnegie and steel mills and Rockefeller and the oil and stuff like that, the railroads. Our private industry took over a large segment of Mexico. That's called neo-imperialism. Also, you've got the spread of socialist ideas or liberal ideas. That means that instead of the government being laissez-faire, which means hands-off, okay, you've got the opposite, where people want the government to step in and protect the people. Okay, like communism. Okay, Karl Marx and his Communist Manifesto was published in I think 1870s. Again, I don't know the exact year, and that's okay. And you don't need to know the exact year either. It helps, but you don't need to know. Just be vague if you have to. Okay, so this is just in general. I'm just trying to write my contextualization. All right, hit pause if you want to write this yourself, but here is mine in blue. Here's something from the College Board, which apparently scores the point. It's not as long as mine, but I think mine's pretty good too. Hit pause if you want to read it, but I'm going to move on. Okay. Now, this does not include my thesis statement. Your thesis statement is going to do two things. It's going to you're going to take a side. The Mexican Revolution was strongly caused by economic problems, or economic problems had a very mild impact on the Mexican Revolution. You know, that's when you're saying evaluating the extent. And then you list your topics. You have to do both. Otherwise, you will not get the thesis point. You got to take a side, say what the extent was, or, you know, whatever you're arguing. You got to make that argument. You got to say what your argument is. Then you got to give a table of contents and say what you're going to write about. It's okay if you skip about 4 lines, depending on how big your handwriting is, and then start on the body paragraph and then come back later and write your thesis. That's what I do. Okay, that's just what works for me. Okay, so, all right, so what you need to do to get your evidence points, you need to source 3 documents for 1 point or source 6 documents for 2 points. And what I mean by source them is you need to describe what they say, and don't forget this, you got to say how it relates to your argument. How does it support what you're arguing? Also, you need to HIP 3 documents. That's another point. When you HIP a document, you say, what is the bias? What is the historical context? What is the purpose of that document? Okay, you got to do that for 3 documents. Okay, all right, so what I'm going to do right now, and this is what you should be doing if you had a paper copy, is you need to read the documents and you need to take notes, you need to underline, and you need to connect these documents to other documents. So if document 1 and 4 say both have a similar supporting of your thesis, then you need to write that down and you need to group the documents. Okay, so I'm going to get started. If you want to do this on your own, hit pause, but I need to get started. All right, so I'm going to start with the source, finance minister and the government, letter to Mexican factory workers who had gone on strike, 1892. Okay, so read it, underline it. The helping the strikers is beyond the government's power to correct. Okay, given the laws of our country, the government cannot restrict the freedom of factory owners to fire or hire workers. Okay, nor can the government intervene directly in the improvement of basic working conditions. So in other words, what we have is laissez-faire. Or if you don't know the word, then you could say something like, the government doesn't care about its people, it cares about the business owners. Okay? Because that's what we're seeing here. It's saying that labor is subject to the laws of supply and demand. So if they want to pay you a nickel an hour, they can do that. And if you don't want to work for them, fine. But to go on strike to bully the factories into raising wages, the government is not going to get involved. Okay, so that is what we call laissez-faire. So you could say that the businesses care more, the government cares more about the businesses than it does the people of Mexico. And thus, that is one of the causes of the Mexican Revolution. So now this is flexible, but would you say this is an is this an economic cause or is it something else? I'm going to go ahead and choose economic, but I could argue that it's political. Okay. All right. Moving on to document 2. All right. So what we have is a protest, and if you can read Spanish, that's good. Government's suppression of street protests in Mexico City after a disputed election in which Diaz was reelected president, despite allegations of widespread voter fraud. Okay, so we've got the cops beating up on innocent people. All right, so does this support politics, a political cause, or does it support an economic cause? I would say this is more economic. I'm sorry, political. Political cause. Okay, I would say this is not an economic cause of the Mexican Revolution. Okay, so let's see what we have in the other. All right, hit pause and read it. All right, so we've got Mexican consul in New York City, basically somebody who represents the government. This is a banquet given by the New York Chamber of Commerce. Remember, commerce is business. Think commercial. In celebration of the good business relationship between Mexico and the USA, Waldorf Astoria Hotel, 1908. Okay. So basically, we've got a speech in which this, and you've already read this, you already hit pause and read it yourself. Okay. But he's talking about all this good stuff. He's glorifying how good American investment in Mexico is. Okay. Outside. Developing the natural resources country. So he's saying that this foreign capital invested in Mexico is a good thing. And as a result, Mexico is flourishing. So what you have here is pro-USA investment. You could even say neo-imperialism. If you don't know the word neo-imperialism, you could just say imperialism. You could say America's private companies are dominating the Mexican economy. Okay, so that's the beauty of vocabulary. It's fewer words. So if you don't know what neo-imperialism, like I didn't, then it would take more words. That's why it's important to study, so you can use big words and it's fewer writing. Okay, so is this economic? Is it political? It's kind of both. But what's important is that Mexico is choosing America's private companies over the people. Okay. All right, pause it, read it. So you've got an American journalist publishing in a book called Barbarous Mexico. So that's already a biased title, and he's talking about what he calls slavery. Sorry if you can't see that. He's calling it slavery. Now, here's some outside information. Slavery has already been outlawed in Mexico by this time. Okay, that's why we had a Texas Revolution in 1836. It was because the Texans wanted to have slaves, and that's why they kind of declared independence from Mexico. Now, I don't think that is outside information that you could use, but I don't think it's relevant. It's too irrelevant. But so basically what you have is some sort of forced labor, poor labor conditions. Again, the government is favoring investors, private corporations, over the people. So more laissez-faire, more not caring about the people. And if you wanted to assert that this was an American company that owned these owned this cash crop, then you could assert that it's about excessive foreign investment. And you can link this. When have we talked about American investment? Right here. So link this, link 3 and 4 linked. Okay, so link 3 and 4, and that shows complex thinking. Okay, what do they have to do with each other? Because they both care more about private business and American private business than the working conditions of the people. Okay. Document 5. Okay, hit pause, try to come up with it on your own. But what we have here is American investment in railways and mines and smelters is much more than that of Mexico. Now, that's not true with, let's say, here, but it is true in some of the major industries, like oil. Okay, so I can imagine Standard Oil coming to Mexico and drilling rubber. So what is the theme? It's that foreign investment, especially American investment into Mexico, is a big deal during this time. Okay, that's it. Okay, we don't need to spend more time on here. This supports the argument that foreign investment is very important in 1911. Okay, we'll figure out where to put that later. Now, you could also link that to here. In document 3, the guy was talking about how awesome American investment is. So I'm going to link that with document 3. Okay. You got to link the documents. It's faster anyway. All right, document 6. Hit pause and read it. So we've got a social reform activist, 1911. Okay. It's called The Right of Property. And he calls the right of property an absurd right. Okay. In the past, land was worked in common. Forest provided to the hearths of all. Harvests were distributed among the members of the community according to their needs. I don't know if you know this, but that sounds like Karl Marx from the Communist Manifesto. Okay. The return of the land to the peasants should be accomplished during the peasant uprising. We revolutionaries will not be committing a crime by turning over the land to the working people, because by natural law, it already belongs to them. So this idea of taking land and giving it back to the poor, that is straight from Karl Marx's Communist Manifesto. Okay? And so what you have during this time is rise of liberal economics. Okay, liberal, left-leaning. Okay, so instead of siding with the businesses, you're siding with the people. That's one way to put it. And then document 7. We got a folk song, 1919, the death of Zapata. All right, hit pause and read it. Zapata was poor, lived among the poor. He says, I don't want riches, I don't want honors. Okay, so again, just like with document 6, he's anti-wealth. He sings for the people. So I'm going to link this to document 6. Okay? So now, this could be the hard part. What you need to do is decide what is your argument. So you've got 6 and 7 that are about liberal economic policies, okay? Meaning like socialist economic policies. You've got 3 and 5 that talk about excessive American or foreign investment. 3 and 5. 3, 4, and 5 are about foreign investment if you really want to push it. Okay, and then you've got 2, which isn't economic at all, it's political. And then you've got 1, which may not be about foreign investment, but it's about the government not caring about the working conditions of the poor, and they care more about the owners of the factory. So this is one of the hard parts, and there's a lot of hard parts, but you need to decide what are your topics going to be. Okay? Hit pause if you want to think about it on your own. Okay? But okay, so this is what I'm going to do, and I'm going to show you my thesis. So this is how I write a thesis. I start with my counterargument, then I say my stance, and then I list the topics. So I'm going to side with economic factors caused the revolution, okay, based on what the documents say. All right, so it's a result of economic factors. So, and these are my topics: laissez-faire economics, socialist politics, such as land redistribution, and excessive foreign investment. Those are going to be my topics. And then my counterargument, while political factors such as disputed elections did play a large role, comma, that's my counterargument. Economics was a major factor in the Mexican Revolution of 1910 to 1920, period. The people of Mexico had a revolution as a result of economic factors such as, and then I list the topics. That is my thesis. It's 2 sentences, 2 complicated sentences. Okay? Now, if you don't do the counterargument, that's fine, but if you write it like that, it'll set you up for complexity. You might get the complexity point. Okay? Now, these do not earn the point. This is from the College Board. Here's one that did not score the point. Economic factors were critical in leading to the outbreak of the Mexican Revolution. All right, so it took a side, but it didn't list the topics. Economic exploitation in Mexico led to the revolution because most of the Mexican people were enslaved on plantations. Okay. It didn't focus on economics causing the revolution. Okay, it just didn't focus. And this one, yeah, it doesn't take a side. That's why. It doesn't say the extent of how economics led to the revolution. And this one doesn't score either. The Mexican Revolution is important to understand because it's southern neighbor of the United States. That doesn't have anything to do with that doesn't. It doesn't address the prompt. Okay. Anyway, moving right along. All right. Screenshot that. Those are also theses that scored the point, but I want to move on. All right. So for evidence, this is your body of the essay. You must source 3 documents for a point, 6 documents for 2 points, and you need to hit 3 documents. All right. So let's get started. All right. So, oh yeah, here are the documents. So here's the prompt again. Evaluate the extent to which economic factors led to the outbreak of the Mexican Revolution. So I'm going to start talking about the documents. Remember, I'm linking them, okay? Hit pause and read that. Okay, so notice I'm talking about document 1, and then I describe what document 1 said, and then you say, so what? The finance minister, first of all, I got a topic sentence. The Mexican Revolution was caused by the government's laissez-faire economics, and it's not caring about the citizens. That's my topic sentence. The finance minister in document 1 tells strikers that unemployment is the result of supply and demand and is out of the government's hands. A position, so then that's where you go, okay, so what? Well, it probably increased people's discontent with the government because they were unwilling to help. The government was unwilling to help. That's when I say that's why this is important. Now, the green, that's when I hip it. I give a bias or a perspective. This letter was written by a government official. The audience is possibly other industrialists who want a government that sides with the rich. There, that's hipping it. Just gave one sentence of trying to give the perspective or the bias. Also, document 4, slavery conditions were described by an American journalist. Such horrible labor conditions shows an economy that is not concerned about the labor conditions. Both document 1 and 4 illustrate this non-caring laissez-faire economics. I should have said helped cause the revolution. And then I tried to hip it. Turner in document 4, who wrote The Barbarous Mexico, probably exaggerated for effect to help the sales of his book. There, I'm trying to hip. Everything green is hip. All right, so I addressed 2 documents and I tried to explain why these documents support my thesis and how economics was the cause of the Mexican Revolution. That's what I tried to do. All right, then you go on to the next topic. Now, for me, it's liberal economic policies. Socialist liberal economic policies also helped to cause the Mexican Revolution. That's my topic sentence. The Mexican people desired more liberal economic policies from their government. Document 6 said the right of property is absurd. Land should be returned to the people. It also said harvests should be distributed to the people according to their need. This idea sounds exactly like Marxist socialist philosophy from his Communist Manifesto just a few decades before. All right, so there I'm trying to bring in outside information, hoping to get the complexity point. Document 7 is a folk song helping people mourn the loss of a revolutionary Zapata. Okay, that's my hip, hopefully. It glorifies Zapata. That's also hipping. Zapata, according to the song, I don't want riches or honors. This sounds like liberal politics. Both 6 and 7 show that the revolution was caused by liberal economics or socialist economics. So I described 2 documents and I tried to say how both documents 6 and 7 support my thesis. I think I did it. I think I did a good job. I don't know, but I think so. Now, moving on. Both document 5 and 3 illustrate how excessive foreign investment in Mexico was an economic cause of the revolution. Document 5 is a chart showing how many millions of dollars the USA invested in Mexico's railroads, oil, and mines. Mexico invested little in comparison. Okay, so I described it. I didn't hip it, but I described it. Okay. Document 3 was a speech in New York City promoting American investment in Mexico. The audience was an international businessmen who were potential investors. The speech glorified investment in Mexico, emphasizing the good without mentioning the bad, such as Doc 4's description of slavery conditions. This excessive investment shows how the Mexican government cared more about U.S. dollars than their citizens' economic prosperity. Okay, I hope that did it. I mentioned 2 documents. I even mentioned 3 documents, hoping for a little bit of complexity there. Now, evidence beyond the documents. So here's something that I mentioned earlier before, but I'm going to mention it again just to help get the point. Economic problems caused by industrialization and economic inequality led to revolts around the world, not just in Mexico, but also in Russia with the Bolshevik Revolution. If you want to add a date, that's fine, 1917. There you go. That's another point right there. And then I'm going to have a counter argument. So remember my thesis? I started with my counter argument. I said, while political factors such as disputed elections did play a large role, now I'm going to talk about my counter argument. Okay? While the revolution was mostly caused by economic factors, there were clearly political factors as well that led to the revolution. Document 2 shows a political cartoon where the police are brutally beating protesters who are protesting a disputed election with voter fraud. Posada's cartoon, while biased against the government, shows that the Mexican people are dissatisfied with the government and are willing to protest over it. This dissatisfaction could help lead to the revolution 20 years later. So what I just did is I said that there was a political factor as well. Okay? All right, that is it. So I hope that helped. This is not easy, and just remember, you may not get all the points. You may get 4 or 5 points. You may get 3, but life goes on, and that's it. I hope that I taught you the process of how to do a DBQ. All right, thank you very much.